Hello everyone, and in this lesson we're going to take a look at how to inflate objects using vellum and then have them float away. Okay, so this is the final result. Okay, so I'm going to just start off, I'm going to duplicate a little bit of stuff over here and then we will work from there. Okay, so I'll do Control C, Control V. What I have is I have a box. So I have this one box and I did a match size to bring it on top. And then I used a remesh, and then I have a line on this side which just sort of attaches into it. So I kind of like just placed it over here and I put the line into a group because I want to split it later. Okay, so I'll just do a merge and then just made a few copies. So this is it. I have like 4 boxes. You can have as many as you want. And then I used a split to just split out the line. Okay, so if I take a look at it, like that's my line and these are my boxes. Okay, so how to start this? Okay, so what I want to do is we want to start off by, like, initially it should be deflated. So our initial state, like, we're going to start by 24. Okay, so from 1 to 24 it'll just deflate and then remain like that. Then what we want is, firstly it should just like inflate and then blow up some more and then it'll eventually float away. So we start off with a balloon constraint. So if you type in balloon, you'll get something called vellum configure balloon, and just plug it in, plug the boxes in here. And I want to do a few things. Like, it basically has 2 things. There's a cloth constraint and then there's like a pressure constraint. So come into the cloth and it's usually kept to this value of like 6 and 100. I'm going to revert this to default. So just revert this to default and right click here and say revert to default. Okay. Then come into the pressure and this is fine. The only thing I want to do is I want to output this as a group because we're going to do a lot of modifications at DOP level. So in order to modify this specific thing, you have to give it a name because they're all called stretch. Like if you come in here, even in the cloth, it's called stretch. So this has to have a unique name. So let's call this balloon. You can call it pressure, you can call it, whatever you want. Okay, now let's take a solver. So we'll take a vellum solver. And if I plug this in, I don't want to do any changes here, just turn on ground position. I'll come into forces and give it some velocity damping and some drag. So it doesn't really like jump around too much. So if I press play, I should just get something simple. Okay, like it just does that. Okay, so the first thing is we need it to deflate. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to modify the stiffness value within the cloth itself. Okay, so if this stiffness value is too low, it'll just sort of deflate. Like if I come into this cloth and this stiffness value, if it goes really low, it just, collapses on its own. So this is the thing that we want to modify. Okay, and then we want to modify the rest length scale. Like if I increase this, or let's make it like 2 or not 21, just make it 2. If I press play, you'll see like it sort of expands a bit. Okay, so that is what we want to do. Okay, so come in here and just type in SOP and you'll get something called a SOP solver, and we want to pick up SOP solver constraint geometry. It's like a ready-made solver. It's just a small modification on the SOP solver, but if you just take this, it gives you like this ready-made setup. What it's doing is it's bringing in the constraint geometry. Okay, like if you look at the standard SOP solver, it works on the default geometry. Okay, so the constraint geometry is the pink input, right? Like if you look at the null here, if you place a null there, so this is the constraint geometry, and all of your constraint attributes are kept here. So this is what we need to modify, and all of these are primitive attributes. So all this SOP solver does is it just brings in the constraint geometry for you. Okay, like if you just copy this name and paste it into the SOP solver, it'll work the same way. Okay, but this is ready-made, so I'm just going to use this. Okay, so come in here, and this is for modifying the geometry. This is for modifying the constraint geometry. So this is what we'll modify. So just type in float. So we'll take attribute just float, and let's do one thing. Let's just come into the cloth as well. And I'll rename this to cloth. Okay, so come in here and this will be called stiffness. Like if you look here, click on the information, you'll see stiffness. Okay, that is the thing that we want to modify. So if I come in here and take this guy, and what we want to modify is stiffness, and we'll do set always, and we can pick up the group, so I can call it cloth. So it's going to modify the cloth group, and make sure the attribute class is kept to primitive. And then if we keep the constant value of, let's say 10, and if I press play, I should see it sort of just collapse. Okay, now it sort of expanded because we gave it some expansion. Let's just keep it to 1, and if I press play, it should pretty much just, go down like that. Okay, or if we try to affect both, that will also work. Like if I just come in here, now we're affecting, yeah, so see, that's the problem. When it tries to affect both, it kind of just explodes like that. Okay, so we modify the cloth. Like let's say if we keep it at 100 and press play. Okay, so what I'll also do is I'll just come into the pressure, and I'm going to reduce this down to 1 and maybe like 10. So it'll just sort of, collapse down on itself like this. Okay, so now the first thing is we want to bring the stiffness up so that it kind of like inflates a bit. So come in here into the SOP solver, and we're going to animate this. So I'm just going to turn off the simulation button. And what I'll do is I'm going to take another attribute, just float, and I'll just give it some name. So let's call it stiff. This will also be on primitive level. Let's see if we can visualize this. And this will be set always. And we're going to set this to we're going to set this to line. And I'm going to animate, this guy. So we start at 0. Where are my lines? I just want to check where my lines are. Okay, so let's start from this side going that way. Okay, so I'll just come in here. So this is it, and we're just going to come to 24 and do like alt click and then come to 72 and just move it that way. So we just have this, and then in the attribute like the stiffness, so let's call this stiffness. I am going to set this to remap attribute, and we're going to go from what were we at, constant of 10, right? So okay, so remap attribute, we're going to start at 10 and go up to 50,000, and we're going to remap stiff. Okay, so if you've done it right, we should be able to see something now. Yeah, just make sure that this is kept to primitive as well. Yeah, it's kept to primitive. So let's press play and let's see if we've done this right. So if I press play, and there you go, see. So it starts to jump up. Okay, let's do one thing. Let's also modify like the balloon stiffness, because that's also pretty low. Okay, so let's bring this up from currently it's 10. So let's take this from 10 to maybe 1,000. So I'll just come in here, and this is modifying the cloth. We'll duplicate this, and this will modify the balloon, and this will start at 10 and go up to let's try 500. Okay, and let's see what we get. So the start should be fine, and yeah, there you go. So that's better. So it's a bit more stiff. Okay, so that way we can sort of modify everything. So it's good to have like this, the animation happening separately, because then we can just remap it to whatever we want. So let's take this up to, let's try 1,000. Yeah, so if you look at it from frame 24 onwards, this should be fine. See, so we have this, and then it kind of just, expands, which is good. Okay, so this is fine, like, where they are. Now the next thing we want to do is, I just wanted to, like, once it's sort of inflated a bit, we wanted to expand more. So we're going to use the rest length. Okay, so come in here, and all we want to do is, we'll call it stiffness balloon, and this is stiffness cloth. Okay, I'm just going to duplicate this guy. So Control C, Control V, bring it in here. Let's rename this to something else. Let's rename this to, let's do inflate, or let's do blow. And where is it? Yeah, okay. So we can visualize this. I'll turn this off. Yeah, that's blow. Except I just want to take it a bit further, and maybe like just take this guy and expand it a bit. And then we take another attribute, just float. This will be primitive level, and this will be rest length. Yeah, and this will affect balloon. And we'll do set always remap attribute. So it will go from, it starts at 1, and let's go up to 5 to begin with, and it will modify blow. Okay, and if you've done everything right, we should have our basic setup in place, which is if you press play, okay, so we're getting like a small modification after the rest length. So what we'll do is, I'm just going to come in here to the rest length, and let's take the minimum value to 0.48. Okay, like I was just testing this out, but yeah, then it is fine. Yeah, there you go. Okay, and now it'll also start to inflate after a while, which is perfect. Okay, so now that this is done, we're actually at a pretty good place. See, so this is what happens. Now, once this is done, we wanted to start floating up. Okay, so for it to float up, we are going to animate the gravity. Okay, using an attribute. Okay, so it has a default gravity value. I don't want that. Okay, we're going to make our own. Okay, so before we remove the gravity, okay, let me just play this through, so I can see at what point we want the gravity to come in. So what we want is that once it starts to expand, then it should start to float up. So somewhere around like frame 72, and they should float up one by one. Like they shouldn't float up, like all of them shouldn't float up together. So what I'll do is I'll come in here, and let's make this 0. And I'm going to make our own gravity. So what I can do is I'm going to do this at warp level. Okay, so just take a pop warp. And we only want to affect the boxes. Okay, we don't want to affect everything, because I don't want the lines to be affected when we bring them in. So I'm going to take a group node here, and I'm going to call this now particles, because vellum is sort of treated like a point level thing at DOP level, so it's sort of like particles. So we have to make a particle group. Okay, so let's call this box points. Okay, and this is what we'll affect. Okay, when we come down here. So if we come here, and we should have box points. There you go. So double click, and then put in a pop warp and group, and this will be box points. Okay. Okay, so just to sort of do this very simply, is I want to affect the force. Okay, so if I just take take a constant, okay, and we'll set this to vector, we'll set it to 3 floats, and we'll make it minus 9.8. Yeah, and then take this and plug it into force. And if I come in here and press play, it will fall down. Okay, pretty much what was happening before, just slightly different, because I think this does something more than that, but there you go. See, so now what we can do is now we can animate it. Okay, so come in here, and the first thing we want to do is take a SOP solver, and we'll call this as, let's call it gravity ramp. Okay, so come in here, and I'll turn this off, and all I want to do is take a float, come to 72. Okay, so let's just call this, we'll call this float, and set always, Can we visualize this? Can we visualize float? Wow, there are so many here. Yeah, okay, so float. And we'll do we'll do ramp, so line, okay, and the same thing. So this comes in here and over there. And then let's do like alt click, come to maybe 120, and it goes like that. So we have like, this going through it. And we come up to forces, come into pop warp. Now we'll have to change this slightly. So we need to do a float to vector, okay, because we're building up from scratch. So take a float to vector. Okay, so take a float to vector. The X and Z will remain 0. We take a bind to bring in the float. Okay, so we bring in float. Okay. Yeah, maybe we change the, maybe we should change the name. Okay, so let's call it rise. Okay, I don't know, let's call it rise. And I can come in here. Yeah, so rise, and then we're going to do a fit range. And this goes from like 0 to 1, and it goes from minus 9.8, or let's do like minus 5 to 5. Okay, and this goes into the Y, and that comes into force. And if we check this, if we visualize rise, is rise here? Hold on, yeah, turn that off. Yeah, we can visualize it. Let's press play and see what we get. Yeah, so this is good. It's fallen down, then it'll start to inflate. And then as it inflates up, see, there you go, they float. So as the value goes through it, see, they start to float up. Yeah, so that gives you your basic setup. So if we I'll just turn this off temporarily. Where is rise? Yeah, okay. And what I can do is let's do something else. Let's just give this some color. Okay, so I'm going to take a connectivity, and just plug this in here. And then take a color node, and we're going to set it from ramp from attribute. The attribute is class, and there are 4 objects, so we go from 0 to 3, and let's set this to 2-tone. Okay, there you go. Okay, so we get, let's just try to expand this a bit. Yeah, okay, so we have, they fall down, and then they expand and they go up. So we have our basic setup done. Now we can start to make some basic modifications. Let's say I wanted to expand a bit more. So let's just call this as inflate. So I jump in here, and the rest length goes from to 10. Let's try 10. So it will sort of inflate a fair bit. You can increase the constraint sub-steps and to make it look a little bit better. And there you go. Okay, now if it doesn't go up, just modify the ramp. So like that will work. Okay, so this is perfect. We're good. Now let's bring in the lines. Okay, so this setup is fine. So now we have the lines. Okay, so with the lines we need to do a few things, right? Like first of all, let's give it some points. So we'll take a resample. Or actually, yeah, we can just add some points here. Okay. Let's give it about 10 points. Yeah, 10 should be fine. Okay. Now we need to select the end points and the start points. So the end points will attach to the box, and the start points will be sort of like rooted here. Okay, so take a for each, because this has to be done inside a for each. Okay, so take a for each, and then I'll take a range. So plug that in, and we'll call it, let's call this glue. Okay, we'll do points, and this should be the end. We'll do invert range. Okay. and then let's just duplicate this. Control C, Control V, and this will be called roots, and this will be the other way around. Okay, so we're selecting the first. So we have, the stuff that we need. Now we need to set this to hair. So do vellum hair configure and plug this in. I just need to make a few small changes to this. Like firstly, the bend stiffness should be higher. Okay, so we're going to take the bend stiffness to about 100. And then I also want the density to be more. Okay, because this is too thin. It's supposed to be hair. But in our case, it's sort of like a rope. Because if it's too thin, the balloon will just pull, like it'll keep stretching the line. So I'll get this to around 1. Okay, and that should be fine. Okay, now we need to attach the boxes to the line. So we're going to take a merge. You can also pack it, but a merge is fine in this case. So I'm going to merge the geometries and then I'll merge the constraints. So let's call this geo and let's call this constraints. I'll just color this to like pink. And then just take a glue constraint. So just type in glue. Yeah, so we'll get like vellum glue and we plug these in. And we want to take the glue points. See, so there you go. And this is fine. And what we want to do is we want to constrain them to a fair few. So let's take this to around 5. See, so it's sort of like, attaches to a fair few points. And this is good. So if I just play this, like if I take this and we'll come here and just play this, see what we get. So press play. Oh, we didn't set up the roots. Sorry, my mistake. Yeah, come into you can actually do this here itself. So you have something called pin to animation and you can just pin the points here itself. So just pick up roots and that should work. And if I press play, there you go. Okay. So now when it starts to expand and float up, it will be attached to this. Okay, so as I start to float up, yeah, okay, so it's floating, but it's also like, so what we want to do is we want to come into the vellum glue and let's increase the stiffness to around 10,000. Okay, and also let's lower the rest length. Okay, and let's press play and see what we get. There you go. So now it's attached to this. Okay, that's not bad. Alright, so it's sort of working, except like, they're sort of rolling around before they float. So let's do one thing. Let's have it float up and then starts to, so as it starts to expand at this point, it should start floating up. So whatever rolling it does it in the air. So all I'll do is I'll come in here to the gravity ramp and just, bring it in at this point. So it starts a little early. Okay. And now if I press play, yeah, so we get this and it will immediately start to float up, which is good. So it doesn't have, even if it rolls around, it doesn't wrap the line around itself, okay, which is what it was doing. So this is good. And also let's come into the hair. I'll make this around 2. So the density, let's make it like a little more, heavier. And let's take the bend stiffness to 1,000 and see what that does. Yeah, that's better. So the line is a lot better now. Okay, so now the only thing left is we need the line to break. Okay, like once it sort of starts to float up, we want the line to start breaking. Okay, so they can sort of like eventually just float away. Now the simplest thing is we can actually try to break it here itself. Like you can come into this point and we can turn on the break threshold. And we can do like stretch distance and keep it to, let's say, 0.05, or let's do 0.01. If I press play, so there you go. They'll just start to break on their own. Well, they all didn't, which is weird, but at least 2 of them broke away. So this is one way to do it. Like I can keep it lower, 0.006. Yeah, it's okay. This time 3 of them broke. So what we want is, we wanted to break using an attribute, right? So what we'll do is, I'll come into the vellum glue and I'm going to output it. So we'll output glue, and we want to modify the break threshold. Like if you click here, you'll see like it's called break threshold. So that is what we need to modify. So this will be the last thing that we change. Okay, so come in here and take another SOP solver. So SOP solver constraint geometry, and we can just pick this up. We'll pick up something from here. So let's come in here. I'll just do Control C, and let's call this break lines. Okay, and come in here, press Control V. So this comes in here. Let's call this breaker. Okay, and we are just going to move this ahead to somewhere here. Okay, and then I'll just duplicate this itself. Actually, no, don't duplicate this. So take another attribute, just float, and the value we want to modify is break threshold. So primitive, the group is glue, and this is called break threshold. And we'll do set always remap attribute. It should go reverse, so it should be 1 in the beginning and 0 in the end. And we are remapping breaker. And if we can visualize this, or actually no need. Okay, so actually we can, like if I just take a null here, and we can visualize breaker. Okay, so press play and let's see what we get. So it's fine, it inflates and floats up, and then when the value should go through it, they will start to break. There you go. Except that one guy. I have a feeling it's stuck in there somewhere. Hold on a second. And let's also do one more thing. I think the lines are sort of like too deep inside it, so they're sort of like intersecting. Yeah, hold on. So if I come in here, yeah, the lines are sort of maybe like going in too much. So let's take this line and make it slightly shorter. Yeah. So if we come up to the glue, yeah, I think this is okay. This is fine. Okay, so let's try play again. And hopefully it should work this time. Yeah, there you go. Perfect, we're done. So now if because I have my groups, I can just take a split here. I have my group called lines, right? So line, there you go. Okay, so we'll do invert selection. So this is the color. And we can merge it with the lines. So if we press play, this is what we get. Yeah. So yeah, it's a fair bit. And then if you, as I said, like you can try to improve, like, you can try to increase the sub steps a little bit more. You'll get a more stable result. But this is the basic setup for it. Okay, so primarily you need to modify a fair few things at constraint level inside DOPS, but it gives you the a level of control that you will need to do something like this. Okay. Okay, so that's pretty much it.